The emergency alarm on Space Station, Hope's Landing, pierced through the quiet of the night shift. Red lights flashed across the curved metallic walls as James Walker rushed to the control room, his boots making heavy sounds against the floor. At 52, he wasn't as fast as he used to be, but decades of working with alien species had taught him that every second counted in an emergency. "What's the situation?" he asked, slightly out of breath, as he entered the bustling control center. The room's massive windows showed the endless dark of space, dotted with distant stars, and the occasional passing ship. Tom, the night shift supervisor, looked up from his glowing screens with worry clear on his face. "We just picked up a distress signal from the research vessel Starseeker. It's different from anything we've seen before." James leaned over the console, his gray eyes narrowing as he studied the strange pattern of the signal. After 30 years as a xenobiologist, he had learned to trust his gut when something felt off. This definitely felt off. "Play the audio," he commanded, and the room filled with a series of sounds that made everyone's skin crawl. It wasn't just the usual static or standard emergency beacons. There were deep, rumbling growls mixed with the crew's panicked voices. "Location?" James asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. "Sector 7, near the Dark Nebula," Tom replied, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Right where the Council reported seeing them." The room grew quiet. Everyone knew about the recent reports from Sector 7. The Galactic Council had classified a new species there, one that had earned the name Alpha Predator within days of its discovery. 3 scout ships had gone missing in that sector last month alone. "The Council representatives are already here," Tom added, gesturing to the meeting room. "They're demanding we send someone to investigate, but no one's volunteering. Can't blame them, really." James straightened up, cracking his neck. He wasn't young anymore, and his joints reminded him of that fact daily. But something about this situation called to him. Maybe it was the scientist in him, or maybe it was just the human urge to help those in danger. "I'll go," he said simply. The control room erupted in protests. "You can't be serious. That's suicide. The Alpha Predators will tear you apart." James raised his hand for silence. "I've studied every known predatory species in our galaxy. If anyone has a chance of understanding what we're dealing with, it's me." "The Council won't like this," Tom warned. "They wanted to send a military team." "Then let me talk to them," James replied, already walking toward the meeting room. Inside, 3 Council representatives sat around a holographic display of Sector 7. They looked up as James entered, their alien features showing various degrees of surprise and concern. The lead representative, a tall being with iridescent scales, spoke first. "Mr. Walker, we understand you're volunteering for this mission." "I am," James confirmed, standing straight despite his tired muscles. "And I'm going alone." "Impossible," another representative chittered, their antennae twitching in agitation. "The Alpha Predator has already killed 27 of our best warriors. We've tracked it hunting in packs, using tactics we thought impossible for mere beasts." James smiled slightly. "Then maybe we should stop thinking of them as mere beasts. Every predatory species I've studied has shown intelligence in its own way. Even on Earth, we once thought our own predators were mindless killers." "Earth," the third representative rumbled, their crystalline form glinting under the lights. "Your planet is known for its abundance of predators. Perhaps that gives you a unique perspective." "It does," James agreed. "And it's why I need to go alone. A military response will only escalate the situation. We need to understand these creatures, not just fight them." After hours of debate, the Council reluctantly agreed. As James walked back to his quarters to prepare for the mission, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to discover something that would change the galaxy's understanding of predatory species forever. He packed light. His research equipment, emergency supplies, and the old leather notebook he always carried. Sometimes the best way to understand a new species was to observe and record things the old-fashioned way. As he closed his bag, he glanced at the small photo of his old dog Rex on his desk and smiled. If humans could turn wolves into loyal companions over thousands of years, who knew what other connections were possible among the stars? The mission would launch in 6 hours. Despite what everyone thought, James wasn't afraid. He was excited. In his experience, the most dangerous things in the galaxy weren't always what they seemed. Sometimes, they were just waiting for someone to understand them. James's small research ship dropped out of hyperspace near the last known location of the Starseeker. The vessel hung motionless against the backdrop of the dark nebula, its running lights still blinking weakly in the void. As he guided his ship closer, he could see the damage. Deep claw marks scored the hull, and several sections were torn open to space. Beginning approach, he reported back to Hope's Landing. The ship appears largely intact, but there's significant external damage. Something very large and very strong did this. The radio crackled with static before Tom's voice came through. James, the Council's sensors are picking up movement inside. You should wait for backup. Negative. James replied calmly, already suiting up in his reinforced spacesuit. If there's anyone alive in there, they can't afford to wait. He didn't mention that the longer they waited, the more likely the Alpha Predator would disappear again. His ship's automatic docking system engaged with a gentle thud. James checked his equipment one last time. Scanner, emergency beacon, and most importantly, his old camera. Sometimes the best scientific observations came from the simplest tools. The airlock cycled, and James entered the Starseeker. His helmet lights cut through the darkness, revealing a scene of chaos. Equipment was scattered everywhere, and deep gouges marked the walls. But something caught his experienced eye. The damage wasn't random. There was a pattern to it, almost like territory marking, he muttered, taking photos. Just like big cats back on Earth. A crash echoed through the ship's corridors. James turned toward the sound, his heart beating faster but his hands steady. He'd been in similar situations before, though usually with smaller predators. The key was to stay calm and observe. Following the sounds, he made his way to the cargo hold. The massive door was partially crushed, forced open by something with incredible strength. James's lights revealed huge storage containers thrown about like toys, and in the center of the destruction. "My God," he whispered. The Alpha Predator was trapped, its massive leg caught under a fallen beam. The creature was even more impressive than the reports suggested. It stood at least 12 feet tall, with armor-like scales that shifted colors in his light. Its head was roughly triangular, with multiple eyes that gleamed with intelligence, and its body was a perfect blend of power and agility. But what struck James most wasn't its fearsome appearance. It was the way it was trying to free itself. It wasn't thrashing blindly like a trapped animal. It was methodically testing different angles, using nearby debris as leverage. This was tool use. The creature froze when it noticed him, its eyes fixing on James with an intensity that made his breath catch. But there was something in those eyes beyond predatory interest. There was pain and something else. Curiosity. James slowly raised his empty hands, remembering countless first encounters with dangerous species. "Easy there, big fellow. I'm not here to hurt you." The creature made a low rumbling sound, but it wasn't the aggressive growl from the distress call. It was more like a response. Taking a calculated risk, James took a step forward. The creature tensed but didn't attack. Another step. Still no aggression. James's mind raced with excitement. This was unprecedented behavior for a supposed mindless killer. He reached the fallen beam and gestured to it, then to himself. "Let me help you." The creature's eyes tracked his movements. Then it shifted slightly, creating space for James to work. The understanding in that simple action confirmed everything James had suspected. "Hope's Landing, are you receiving?" he said into his radio, never taking his eyes off the creature. "Tell the Council they're wrong. The Alpha Predator isn't just an animal. I think. I think we're dealing with a fully sentient species." The creature made another sound, this one almost like a purr, and James could have sworn its scales shifted to a warmer color. He smiled behind his helmet. This was why he loved his job. The moment when fear turned to understanding, when the unknown became known. "Don't worry," he told the creature as he began working on the beam. "We're going to figure this out together." 3 days had passed since James first encountered the trapped alpha predator on the Starseeker. Now, in a specially prepared containment area on Hope's Landing, he sat cross-legged on the floor, watching the massive creature explore its surroundings. The Council had strongly opposed bringing it to the station, but James had insisted. After all, he argued, we're better to study an intelligent species than in a proper research facility. "You remind me of the ancient predators from Earth," James said, making notes in his leather book. The creature turned its head at the sound of his voice, scales shifting to a deep blue color. "I think I'll call you Rex. That was the name of one of Earth's greatest predators. And my old dog, too." Rex, as the creature was now known, made a series of clicking sounds followed by a low rumble. Over the past few days, James had started to recognize patterns in these vocalizations. They weren't random noises. They were deliberate attempts at communication. "That's right, keep talking," James encouraged, picking up a tablet. He had developed a simple system. He would show Rex images, and Rex would respond with sounds and color changes. The creature was learning at an incredible rate. Behind the observation window, a group of council representatives watched with a mixture of fear and fascination. They had never seen anyone interact so casually with an alpha predator before. "Look at this," James called out to them, holding up an image of a star system. Rex immediately changed colors to match the stars in the image and made a series of precise clicks. James showed another image, a different star system, and Rex's response changed completely. "They're not just sounds," James explained excitedly. "Rex is describing the systems. The clicks represent stellar positions. This isn't just intelligence. This is a sophisticated spatial language." One of the council members, the crystalline being, stepped closer to the window. "Impossible. We've been studying their attacks for months. They showed no signs of civilization." As if understanding the doubt in the alien's voice, Rex stood to its full height and began tracing patterns in the air with its clawed hands. James watched in amazement as the movements became more precise, more deliberate. "It's not random," James said softly, recording everything with his camera. "Rex is trying to show us something." He quickly grabbed his tablet and pulled up a star chart. The patterns matched perfectly with known trade routes through the sector. The council members murmured among themselves as James continued working with Rex. Using a combination of images, gestures, and sounds, they slowly began to build a basic vocabulary. Rex proved to be not just intelligent, but eager to learn. "The stalkers," James translated after a particularly long session of communication. "That's what they call themselves. They're not mindless hunters. They're explorers, like us." Rex confirmed this with a gentle rumble and a shift to a warm golden color that James had come to associate with agreement. The creature then did something unexpected. It mimicked the action of writing that it had seen James do countless times. James's heart raced with excitement. He carefully offered Rex a large digital drawing pad. The creature's claws were surprisingly precise as they traced complex patterns across the screen. "Star maps," James breathed in wonder. "You're showing us your navigation charts, aren't you?" The council representatives pressed closer to the window as Rex drew more patterns, each one corresponding to different sectors of space. The crystalline being's voice came through the speaker, filled with astonishment. "These match our oldest space lanes, routes we thought were lost to time." James smiled as he watched Rex continue to draw. "The stalkers aren't destroying ships because they're violent. They're trying to protect these ancient space routes. Everything we thought we knew about them was wrong." He glanced at the worried faces of the council members and added, "The question is, are we ready to admit our mistake and learn from them instead of fearing them?" Rex stopped drawing and looked directly at James, its scales shifting through a complex pattern of colors. In that moment, James knew they were on the verge of something revolutionary. If only they could get others to understand. James sat in his quarters late at night, reviewing weeks of recordings from his sessions with Rex. The walls were covered with star charts, and his desk was buried under notebooks filled with translations of the Stalker's color-based language. Something had been bothering him about the whole situation, and he was determined to find out what it was. "Play recording 47 again," he told his computer, rubbing his tired eyes. The holographic display showed Rex describing the first contact between stalkers and other species. The creature's colors shifted through dark, mournful shades as it made the gestures. "Stop," James commanded suddenly. "Go back 10 seconds. He watched the sequence again, this time paying attention to a detail he'd missed before. Rex wasn't showing aggression in the historical account. The stalkers were defending themselves. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. It was Bill, one of the younger human scientists who had started helping with the research. "James, you need to see this," he said, holding up a datapad. "I found something in the old council records." The two men hunched over the pad, reading through ancient reports. Bill had discovered records of the first encounters with the stalkers, dating back over a century. But these weren't the official versions James had read before. "Look at these dates," Bill pointed out. "The first attack attributed to the stalkers happened after 3 of their observation posts were destroyed by council ships. They weren't the aggressors. They were retaliating." James felt his stomach sink. The council's been lying all this time. The stalkers were peaceful until they were attacked. He thought about Rex's careful drawings of the space lanes. They weren't attacking random ships either. They were trying to protect important cultural sites. Just then, James's computer chimed with an urgent message. It was from the Starseeker's recovered databanks. The ship's final logs painted a very different picture from the official story. "The Starseeker wasn't attacked," James read aloud, his voice growing angry. "They discovered a hidden stalker archive and were trying to destroy it. Rex was protecting their history." Bill looked nervous. "What are you going to do?" James stood up, gathering his notes. "I'm going to show this to everyone. The council can't keep hiding the truth." He rushed to Rex's containment area, his mind racing. The stalker was awake, its scales glowing softly in the dim light. When James entered, Rex immediately sensed his agitation. "I know what really happened," James said, spreading out the evidence on a table. "Your people were peaceful. You were scientists and explorers, weren't you?" Rex's colors shifted to a deep, resonant blue, their color for truth. The creature began drawing again, but this time the images were different. They showed vast libraries, observation posts among the stars, and peaceful meetings with other species. Then the images changed to show destruction, fear, and finally, the stalkers going into hiding. "The attack on the Starseeker," James said slowly. "You were defending a library, weren't you? Not hunting them." Rex's colors pulsed in agreement. The creature added one more drawing, a map showing dozens of hidden stalker archives scattered throughout the galaxy. "Your people have been protecting knowledge all this time," James whispered. "While everyone thought you were monsters, you were preserving history." The station's lights suddenly flashed red, and alarms began blaring. Bill burst into the room, out of breath. "James, we got trouble. The council's received your findings, but instead of acknowledging them, they're sending ships. They're saying you've been compromised, that Rex has manipulated you." James looked at Rex, seeing not a fearsome predator, but a guardian of knowledge, a scientist like himself. He made his decision. "Contact every human outpost in range," he ordered Bill. "Send them everything we found. The truth needs to come out." He turned to Rex. "And we need to warn your people. The real fight for understanding is about to begin." Rex's scales shifted to a color James had never seen before, A brilliant, determined silver. Whatever came next, human and stalker would face it together. The emergency sirens of Hope's Landing screamed as 3 Council warships dropped out of hyperspace. James ran through the station's corridors, his heart pounding. They had less than 20 minutes before the ships would dock. Status report. He called out as he burst into the control room. The screen showed chaos as human outposts across the sector responded to their emergency broadcast about the stalkers. 6 human colonies have confirmed they received our evidence, Tom reported from his station. They're demanding the Council explain themselves, but these warships aren't waiting for explanations. Bill rushed in with more news. The Council's strike team is already aboard. They're heading for Rex's containment area. James grabbed the station's intercom. This is James Walker. All personnel, evacuate Section C immediately. This is not a drill. He turned to Tom. Lock down all corridors leading to Rex. Buy us some time. But it was too late. The station shuddered as something massive slammed against the containment area's doors. Through the security feeds, they watched Council soldiers setting up weapon positions. They're going to kill Rex, James said, his voice hard. After everything we discovered, they'd rather destroy the evidence than admit they were wrong. The containment doors burst open in a shower of sparks. Soldiers poured in, weapons raised. But Rex was ready. The stalker's scales shifted to deep black, blending with the shadows. Years of being hunted had taught the species how to fight back. We have to help, Bill said, reaching for the security controls. Wait, James ordered, watching the screen intently. Rex wasn't attacking the soldiers. Instead, the massive creature was disarming them with precise, careful movements, avoiding lethal force. Suddenly, new alarms blared. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Tom shouted, "But they're not Council vessels." The station's windows lit up as a dozen sleek ships appeared, their designs unlike anything they'd seen before. Their hulls rippled with color changes that James immediately recognized. The stalkers, he breathed. They got our warning. The Council warships immediately turned their weapons toward the new arrivals, but the stalker vessels made no aggressive moves. Instead, they projected massive holographic images into space, records of the Council's first attacks, proof of the stalkers' peaceful history, and documentation of their role as guardians of knowledge. They were broadcasting the truth to everyone. Inside the station, Rex had successfully contained the strike team without seriously injuring anyone. The creature's scales now pulsed with calm, steady colors as it made its way to the control room. Look, Bill pointed to the screens. The human colonies were responding. Ships from Earth, Mars, and every human settlement in range were moving to position themselves between the Council warships and the stalker vessels. James grabbed the station's communication system. This is James Walker of Hope's Landing to all vessels. The stalkers are not our enemies. They never were. They're scholars, explorers, and protectors of knowledge, just like us. Rex reached the control room and moved to stand beside James. Together, human and stalker faced the screens showing the standoff in space. The Council warships powered up their weapons. For a terrible moment, everyone held their breath. Then a new voice came over the communication system, the crystalline Council member who had watched James work with Rex. "Stand down," the Council member ordered. "I've seen enough. We were wrong about the stalkers, and it took human persistence to show us the truth." The warship's weapons powered down. On every screen, ships from dozens of species were arriving, drawn by the stalkers' broadcast. The truth was spreading faster than anyone could have stopped it. James looked up at Rex, whose scales were shifting through colors of hope and triumph. "You know," he said with a tired smile, "all of this could have been avoided if people had just tried talking to each other in the first place." Rex's answering rumble sounded almost like laughter. Around them, humans and aliens alike were already gathering, eager to learn the real story of the stalkers. The time for secrets was over. The galaxy was about to change forever. 1 month after the standoff at Hope's Landing, James stood in the grand hall of the newly established Galactic Knowledge Exchange. The massive space station, built jointly by humans and stalkers, housed the first public display of stalker archives in over a century. Rex moved beside him, scales shimmering with pride as they watched various species explore the exhibits. Young aliens gathered around stalker teachers, learning the color language that James had first decoded. In another corner, human scientists worked with stalker archivists to translate ancient star charts. "Remember when everyone thought you were going to eat me?" James asked with a smile. Rex's scales rippled with amusement, displaying the rich gold color that humans had learned meant laughter. A group of council representatives approached them, led by the crystalline being who had helped stop the conflict. They looked different now, humbled, but also energized by the changes sweeping through galactic society. "The human colonies are reporting extraordinary breakthroughs," the crystalline one announced. "The Stalker's deep space navigation techniques have already made our ships twice as efficient, and their methods of preserving knowledge. We had no idea such technology existed." James nodded, watching a stalker demonstrate their color-changing abilities to an amazed group of children from various species. "That's what happens when you stop fearing something long enough to understand it." "The council was wrong," the representative admitted. "For generations, we let fear blind us to the truth. The stalkers weren't monsters. They were trying to preserve knowledge that could have helped us all." Rex moved to one of the central displays, activating a hologram that showed the locations of hundreds of hidden stalker archives throughout the galaxy. Many were still being discovered, each one containing centuries of collected wisdom. "We're finding new archives every day," James explained. "Star charts, scientific discoveries, records of ancient civilizations. The stalkers preserved it all. They didn't attack ships because they were hunting. They were protecting these sites from being destroyed by people who didn't understand their importance." A commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A new group of stalkers had arrived, their scales displaying complex patterns that Rex had taught James to recognize as formal greetings. Among them was a smaller stalker, just learning to control its color changes. The first stalker child to be born in public in over 100 years, James told the council members. They're finally feeling safe enough to let their families be seen. The crystalline being's voice held wonder. "How many stalkers have been hiding all this time?" "Enough to fill a dozen star systems," James replied. "But they're not hiding anymore." Humanity's acceptance showed other species that coexistence wasn't just possible, it was better for everyone. Around them, the revolution continued to unfold. Trade agreements were being signed, cultural exchanges were being planned, and joint scientific missions were being organized. The stalkers' vast knowledge of space travel was transforming exploration, while their data preservation techniques were revolutionizing research across all fields. Rex touched the display controls, bringing up images of new ships being built in human shipyards, vessels designed to accommodate both species, combining human ingenuity with stalker technology. "The first joint deep space expedition leaves next week," James said proudly. "Humans and stalkers, working together to explore beyond the known galaxy. Who knows what we'll discover?" The council representatives watched as more visitors poured into the exchange, their fear of the stalkers replaced by curiosity and respect. The galaxy was changing, one conversation at a time. "Perhaps," the crystalline being mused, "this is why humans have survived despite being from such a dangerous world. You don't just adapt to predators, you learn to understand them." James looked up at Rex, remembering their first meeting in the damaged cargo hold of the Starseeker. Sometimes the scariest thing in the room is just waiting for someone to look past their fear and see the truth. Rex's scales shifted to that brilliant silver color of determination and hope. Together, they watched the future unfold in the Great Hall, as the revolution they started continued to spread across the stars. 6 months had passed since the opening of the Galactic Knowledge Exchange, and James stood on the bridge of the Explorer 1, the first joint human-stalker deep space vessel. The ship's massive view screen showed an unexplored sector of space, filled with strange energy readings that had attracted both species' attention. Rex stood at the navigation console, scales shifting through analytical patterns as they studied the sensor data. Around them, human and stalker crew members worked together with the ease of long practice. What had once seemed impossible was now everyday reality. "Energy signature confirmed," announced Bill, now serving as the ship's science officer. "It matches the patterns described in the ancient stalker archives. There's definitely something out there." James smiled at the excitement in his friend's voice. The archives had led them to this distant sector, following tales of an ancient species that had mastered biological technology. If the stories were true, they might be about to make history. "Multiple contacts ahead," the human sensor operator called out. "They're alive. The ships are actually alive." The view screen showed organic-looking vessels, their surfaces rippling like sea creatures. They were unlike anything either humans or stalkers had encountered before. "Open all frequencies," James ordered. "Let's do this right this time." Rex's scales shifted to a calm blue as they activated the ship's communication array. Together, they had developed a new first contact protocol that combined human diplomatic approaches with stalker knowledge preservation techniques. The organic ships responded with pulses of bioluminescence. Rex's scales immediately began matching the patterns, already working to understand the new language. "Just like old times," James said quietly, remembering their first attempts at communication in the cargo hold of the Starseeker. Rex rumbled in agreement, their friendship now a symbol of what was possible when species chose understanding over fear. A holographic image appeared on their bridge, a creature of light and energy, its form constantly shifting. The new species was beautiful and strange, but nobody on the bridge showed fear. They had learned that lesson well. "We are the Luminary," the being announced, somehow speaking directly into their minds. "We have watched and waited, hoping to find others who could bridge the gap between different forms of life." James and Rex exchanged glances. "That's exactly what we've been learning to do," James replied. The Luminary's glow brightened. "We know. We have observed the recent changes in your galaxy. The partnership between humans and stalkers has proven that true understanding is possible between very different species." Around the bridge, the crew watched in amazement as the Luminary shared images of their civilization. Living ships that grew rather than being built, cities that thought and dreamed, and technology that blended seamlessly with nature. "Your two species together have the potential to help others achieve similar understanding," the Luminary continued. "That is why we revealed ourselves now. There are more species waiting to be discovered, more bridges to be built." Rex's scales shifted to that brilliant silver color of hope and determination, the same color they had shown during the crisis at Hope's Landing. James understood. They were being offered a chance to do for others what they had done for themselves. "We would be honored to learn from you," James said, "and to help spread understanding throughout the galaxy." The Luminary's response filled the bridge with warm light. "Then let us begin. The universe is vast, and there are many more stories of understanding waiting to be written." As the Explorer One's crew began their first exchange with the Luminary, James looked around the bridge. Humans and stalkers working side by side, now reaching out to an entirely new form of life. All because one human had chosen to look past fear and see the truth. "Ready for another adventure?" he asked Rex. Rex's scales rippled with all the colors they had used to first communicate. Curiosity, friendship, determination, and hope. Their answer didn't need translation. The next chapter was just beginning, and this time, they would write it together.